Commander Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the research vessel Meridian, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship's engines through her fingertips. 23 years of service in the Interstellar Security Initiative had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct she possessed was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The distress call from the Meridian had been brief and cryptic. Anomalous biological discovery. Request immediate ISI oversight. Nothing more. In the 3 days it had taken Sarah's team to reach the research vessel's coordinates in the Kepler Nebula, they had received no additional communication despite repeated attempts to establish contact. Standing beside her in the cramped airlock, Agent Marcus Rodriguez checked his weapon for the third time in as many minutes. His dark eyes met Sarah's through his helmet visor, and she could see her own concerns reflected there. Behind them, the rest of their 6-person team waited in tense silence. Dr. Elena Vasquez, their xenobiologist, clutched her scanner with white knuckles. Tech specialist James Park's fingers danced nervously over his tablet. Agents Liu Wei and David Okafor flanked the group, their weapons ready but not drawn. The airlock cycled through its sequence with mechanical precision, and the inner door hissed open to reveal the Meridian's main corridor. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow, and the air carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere running on backup systems. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. "This is ISI Commander Chen. Please respond." Nothing but the hum of life support systems answered her. The team moved through the ship with practiced efficiency, clearing each section methodically. The Meridian was a small research vessel, built for a crew of 12. They found 11 bodies. Dr. Patricia Williams, the mission commander, lay slumped over her desk in the captain's quarters, a half-finished message still glowing on her personal tablet. Her face was peaceful, as if she had simply fallen asleep while working. The same was true of the others. No signs of violence, no indication of struggle or panic. They had all simply stopped. "Biological agent?" Rodriguez asked, running his scanner over Williams's body. Vasquez shook her head, studying her own readings. "No toxins detected. No viral or bacterial contamination. Cellular structure appears normal." It's like they all just died simultaneously. Sarah picked up Williams's tablet and scrolled through the last message. "Personal log, day 127. The discovery is beyond anything we imagined. Initial scans suggest the entity is not only alive but possibly sentient. Dr. Morrison believes the preservation system is some form of advanced stasis technology, far beyond our current capabilities. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. I've made the decision to wake her. God help us all." The message cut off there, time-stamped 47 hours ago. "Her," Sarah murmured, looking up at her team. "They found someone. They located the source of the anomalous readings in the modified cargo bay that the Meridian had converted into a temporary laboratory." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as they entered the chamber. In the center of the room sat a crystalline pod roughly the size of a small car. The material appeared to be some form of transparent metal or advanced polymer, its surface covered in intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow when observed directly. Soft blue light pulsed from within, creating patterns that reminded Sarah of a slow, steady heartbeat. But it was what lay inside the pod that made the entire team freeze in shock. A child floated in the pod's center, suspended in what appeared to be a thick, luminescent fluid. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old by human standards, though her alien nature was immediately apparent. Her skin was a pale, translucent blue that seemed to glow within her light. Silver hair drifted around her delicate features like liquid moonlight. Her limbs were longer and more graceful than a human child's, ending in hands with 6 elongated fingers. But it was her face that hit Sarah like a physical blow. Even unconscious, even clearly not human, there was something unmistakably vulnerable and innocent about her features. This wasn't some monstrous alien creature from humanity's worst nightmares. This was a child who was dying. The crystalline patterns on the pod's surface were growing dimmer as they watched, the pulsing light becoming increasingly erratic. Cables and monitoring equipment surrounded the pod, most of it jury-rigged by the research team in what had clearly been a desperate attempt to understand the alien technology. "My God," Dr. Vasquez whispered, moving closer to examine the readings on the human-built monitors. "The power levels are dropping. Whatever's keeping her in stasis, it's failing." Agent Park was already scanning the pod with his equipment. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. This technology is easily centuries, maybe millennia beyond our current capabilities." Sarah circled the pod slowly, taking in every detail. The child's chest rose and fell in an impossibly slow rhythm. Her closed eyes moved occasionally beneath their lids, suggesting dreams or perhaps nightmares. There were no obvious signs of injury, but something about her stillness suggested profound exhaustion or trauma. "Commander," Rodriguez called from across the lab, "you need to see this." He was standing before a large display screen that Dr. Williams' team had apparently been using to analyze their discovery. The screen showed a complex star chart with one particular system highlighted in red. "The pod's trajectory," Rodriguez explained, manipulating the display. "We tracked its course backward." It came from here. "The Vega system. But look at this." He enhanced the image and Sarah's blood ran cold. The planets in the Vega system were nothing but dead rock and cooling magma. Whatever had once been there was gone. "Recent stellar bombardment," doctors said. Vasquez confirmed, studying the readings. "Massive energy weapons, far beyond anything we've seen before. The entire system was sterilized maybe 6 months ago." Sarah stared at the screen, then back at the child in the pod. A refugee. A survivor of genocide. The last of her people, perhaps. "There's more," Park added quietly. He had connected his equipment to the research team's computers and was scrolling through their accumulated data. The initial scans detected traces of other pods. This child wasn't alone when she left her home system. There were others, maybe dozens. "Where are they now?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Gone. The debris field we passed through on our way here? It matches the materials used in these pods. Someone hunted them down. Someone destroyed every other survivor except her." The implications hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just a first contact scenario. This was a war refugee situation, and whoever had committed genocide against this child's people was still out there. "Sir," Agent Liu spoke up from where she had been monitoring communications. "I'm picking up long-range transmissions."
"Multiple ships. Heading our way."
"ETA approximately 6 hours. Sarah felt her jaw clench. "Origin? Unknown configuration. Not human. Dr. Vasquez had moved to the pod's control panel. What little of it the human team had managed to decipher. "Commander, the stasis field is collapsing faster now. Whatever's keeping her alive, it won't last more than a few hours. We need to get her to a proper medical facility." Sarah looked around at her team, weighing their options. Standard ISI protocol was clear. Any alien technology or life forms were to be secured and transported to Earth for study. The child would become a research subject, poked and prodded and analyzed until every secret of her biology and her people's technology had been extracted. If she survived the process. But as Sarah stared down at that small, peaceful face, she found herself thinking about her own daughter back on Earth. Emma was 12 now, just about the same apparent age as the alien child. How would Sarah feel if Emma was alone and dying in some alien laboratory while bureaucrats debated her fate? "Pack it up," she said finally. "All of it. We're taking her with us." Rodriguez frowned. "Commander, our ship's medical bay isn't equipped for alien physiology. We don't even know if our atmosphere is safe for her. Then we'll have to learn fast." Sarah's voice carried the tone that her team knew meant the discussion was over. "Whatever killed her people is coming this way. We're not leaving a child here to die." Dr. Vasquez was already studying the pod's readings more closely. "I think I can rig a portable power source to keep the stasis field stable during transport. It won't be perfect, but it should buy us some time." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Park, I want you to download everything from the Meridian's computers. Every scan, every analysis, every speculation." Liu Okafor. Secure the ship and prepare for immediate departure. As her team sprang into action, Sarah found herself alone with the dying child for a moment. She pressed her hand against the warm surface of the pod, feeling the alien technology humming beneath her palm. "I don't know who you are," she whispered. "I don't know what happened to your family or your world, but I swear to you, we're going to try to save you." The child's eyes remained closed, but for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw the faintest flutter of movement beneath her lids, as if somehow, impossibly, she had heard. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically to create a portable life support system for the pod, while Park downloaded terabytes of data from the Meridian's computers. The rest of the team prepared their ship for what might be a very dangerous journey home. The approaching alien vessels were getting closer, their signatures becoming stronger and more distinct. Whatever they were big, fast, and heading directly for the Meridian's position. "Final power coupling in place," Vasquez announced, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air. The portable generators will maintain the stasis field for maybe 72 hours. After that, we'll figure something else out, Sarah said firmly. How's the transfer looking? Risky, Vasquez admitted. Moving her could destabilize the entire system, but leaving her here is certain death. Sarah nodded. Then we move her. The process of transferring the pod to their ship took another hour of painstaking work. Every minute brought the alien vessels closer. By the time they had the child secured in their modified cargo bay, long-range sensors were beginning to pick up individual ship configurations. They were unlike anything in human databases, organic curves mixed with metallic edges, suggesting a technology that was part machine, part something else entirely, and they were heavily armed. Departure vector laid in, Rodriguez reported from the pilot station. But Commander, these ships are faster than us. If they want to fight, they'll catch us long before we reach human space. Sarah settled into the commander's chair, studying the tactical display. 7 alien vessels, all larger than their ISI corvette, all closing fast. In a straight fight, her ship wouldn't last 5 minutes, but maybe they didn't want to fight. Maybe they just wanted the child. Open a communication channel, she ordered. Badges started to protest. Do it! The channel opened with a hiss of static, and Sarah took a deep breath. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Interstellar Security Initiative. We have rescued a survivor from the destroyed research vessel Meridian. We are withdrawing to provide medical assistance. Please acknowledge. For a long moment there was only silence. Then the speakers crackled to life with a sound unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. A voice that seemed to be made of crystalline wind and distant thunder.
Return the hair, human vessel. Return what you have stolen, and your deaths will be swift.
The channel cut off, leaving Sarah's bridge in stunned silence. The alien ships continued their approach, weapons beginning to charge with ominous energy readings. Sarah looked back at the cargo bay where the alien child lay dying in her crystalline pod. An heir. That explained the desperate pursuit, the systematic destruction of the other refugee pods. This wasn't just any survivor. She was someone important. Someone worth hunting across the galaxy. Someone worth saving. Take us out of here, Sarah ordered. Maximum burn. And send an emergency transmission to ISI Command. Tell them we're coming home with precious cargo, and we're going to need all the help we can get. As their ship leaped into faster-than-light travel, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just started something that would change the course of human history. Behind them, 7 alien warships followed in pursuit, their intentions as clear as the starlight streaming past the viewports. The hunt had begun. And somewhere in the cargo bay, a dying alien child held the key to humanity's first test as a galactic species, a test they couldn't afford to fail. The ISI corvette Determination shuddered as another pulse blast sailed past their starboard hull, close enough that the energy discharge left after images on the bridge displays. Commander Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as the ship's artificial gravity struggled to compensate for their increasingly erratic maneuvers. Pursuing vessels closing to firing range, Agent Liu reported from the tactical station, her normally steady voice tight with concentration. Whatever those weapons are, they're tearing through our rear shields like they're made of paper. 18 hours had passed since their escape from the Meridian, and their alien pursuers had proven both relentless and terrifyingly advanced. The 7 ships matched their every course change, every desperate attempt to lose them in the stellar debris fields scattered throughout this region of space. Worse, they were slowly gaining ground. Time to the Terran defense grid? Sarah asked. Rodriguez checked his navigation display. At current speed, 54 hours. But, Commander, they'll catch us in less than 12 if we can't find a way to slow them down. Another impact, this one closer. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the ship's bowels, an alarm began wailing before tech specialist Park silenced it from his engineering station. Hull integrity holding at 80 to 7%, he reported. But we can't take many more hits like that. Sarah's mind raced through their dwindling options. They had already jettisoned everything non-essential to increase their speed. The ship's reactor was running at dangerous levels, pushed beyond its design specifications. Their weapons were laughably inadequate against ships that could apparently shrug off humanity's most advanced military technology. But it wasn't the approaching alien fleet that worried her most. It was what was happening in the cargo bay. Dr. Elena Vasquez had barely left the converted medical facility they had created around the alien child's pod in the past day and a half. Her reports grew increasingly grim with each passing hour. The portable power system they had rigged was functioning, but barely. The stasis field fluctuated unpredictably, and the child's vital signs, what they could understand of them, were becoming increasingly erratic. "Commander!" Vasquez's voice crackled over the intercom from the cargo bay. "You need to see this." Sarah handed command to Rodriguez and made her way through the ship's corridors. The determination wasn't built for extended missions, and the strain of their desperate flight showed in every system. Lights flickered occasionally, the air recyclers wheezed with overuse, and the deck plating vibrated with harmonics that suggested their engines were being pushed far beyond safe parameters. The cargo bay had been transformed into something resembling a medical facility, though it would have horrified any doctor from Earth's finest hospitals. Jury-rigged monitors surrounded the crystalline pod, their displays showing readings that nobody fully understood. Power cables snaked across the floor, connecting the alien stasis system to their ship's reactor through a bewildering array of adapters and converters. But it was the child herself that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. She was awake. Large, luminous eyes, the color of deep space, gazed up through the transparent aluminum of the pod's viewing port. They were alien eyes, yes, larger than human, with pupils that contracted and expanded in patterns that suggested a fundamentally different way of processing light. But there was something unmistakably aware in them, unmistakably intelligent, and unmistakably afraid. "She's been conscious for about 20 minutes, Dr. Vasquez explained quietly. "I don't think she understands where she is or what's happening. Her stress levels are off the charts, but I can't communicate with her. The translation protocols we have are useless. We don't even know if she communicates through sound." Sarah knelt beside the pod, bringing her face level with the child's, those alien eyes fixed on hers, and for a moment she felt a strange sensation, as if something was gently touching the edges of her mind. Not intrusive, not threatening, more like a tentative question. "Hello," Sarah said softly, placing her hand on the pod's surface where the child could see it. "My name is Sarah. We're trying to help you." The child's mouth moved behind the breathing apparatus that kept her alive in the pod's alien atmosphere. No sound reached them, but her expression seemed to shift slightly. The fear remained, but something else joined it. Hope, perhaps, or at least curiosity. "The good news is that her awakening seems to be stabilizing some of the biological processes," Vasquez continued. "The bad news is that it's putting additional strain on the stasis system." "And, Commander," she hesitated, then activated one of her monitors. "There's something else. Look at this." The display showed a three-dimensional map of the child's brain activity. Even to Sarah's untrained eyes, the patterns were clearly far more complex than anything human. But what caught her attention was the way certain regions pulsed in sync with the ship's long-range sensors. "She knows they're coming," Vasquez said. "Somehow she's aware of the ships pursuing us, and I think she understands what that means." Sarah looked back down at the child, who was still watching her with those impossibly large eyes. The fear in them had intensified, but there was something else now, something that might have been resignation. "She thinks we're going to give her up," Sarah realized. "She thinks we'll hand her over to save ourselves." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Emergency lighting kicked on as the main power grid fluctuated, and the alien child's eyes went wide with terror. Her hands, those six-fingered, impossibly graceful hands, pressed against the inner surface of the pod as if she were trying to escape. "Commander to the bridge, urgent." Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Sarah squeezed Dr. Vasquez's shoulder. "Keep monitoring her. And Elena? Talk to her. I don't care if she can't understand the words. She needs to know she's not alone." The bridge was chaos when Sarah returned. The pursuing alien fleet had closed to within weapons range and was no longer content to simply chase them. Energy beams and projectile weapons filled the space around the Determination, their ship's defensive system struggling to track and intercept the incoming fire. "They're not trying to destroy us," Agent Okafor reported from his tactical analysis station. "Those shots are precisely aimed. Engines, communications array, navigation sensors, they want to disable us. So they can board us," Sarah concluded grimly. "How long until they succeed?" "At this rate, maybe 30 minutes, Rodriguez replied, wrestling with the controls as another impact sent shockwaves through the ship. "Our point defense systems are being overwhelmed." Sarah stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. They could try to ram one of the pursuing ships, maybe take out one or two of them in a suicide run. They could attempt to reach the nearest human outpost, though it was too far away and too lightly defended to make any real difference. They could surrender and hope the aliens were more interested in the child than in revenge against her rescuers. None of those options felt right. None of them felt like something a human would do. "Park," she called to the tech specialist. How much power can we divert from non-essential systems? Already done, Commander. Life support is running on minimum, artificial gravity is down to 60%, and we've shut down everything except engines, weapons, and shields. Plus the power for our passengers pod, of course. Of course. Sarah studied the readings from the child's stasis system. The power drain was enormous, eating up nearly 15% of their total reactor output. In a normal situation, that wouldn't matter. But running from aliens with technology centuries ahead of their own was anything but normal. But if we shut down the stasis field, Agent Liu asked quietly, reroute all that power to engines and weapons? We could... No. Sarah's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. That child is why we're here. She's why those people on the Meridian died trying to save her. We don't abandon her now. Liu nodded, though Sarah could see the doubt in her eyes. It was a doubt she suspected was shared by the rest of her crew. They were trained ISI agents, after all. Their job was to protect human interests, human lives. Sacrificing themselves for an alien child went against everything they had been taught about priorities and acceptable losses. But sometimes, Sarah thought as she watched the alien ships closing in on them, training wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to decide what kind of person you really were. Commander, Rodriguez called urgently. I'm receiving a transmission. It's from the aliens, but they're using our communication protocols. Put it through. The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made everyone on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. The being facing them was clearly the same species as the child in their cargo bay, but where she was small and vulnerable, this creature radiated power and authority. Its skin was the same translucent blue, but darker, with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow beneath the surface. Its silver hair was longer, more elaborate, woven with what appeared to be metallic threads, and its eyes, those large, luminous eyes, burned with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. When it spoke, its voice carried the same crystalline, musical quality they had heard before, but now there were undertones of barely controlled rage. Humans, it said, the word dripping with contempt. You have stolen the last heir of the Cathara. You have defiled sacred blood with your primitive technology. Return her now, and we will grant you the mercy of a clean death. Sarah stepped forward, acutely aware that she was probably about to start humanity's first interstellar war. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Interstellar Security Initiative. The individual you're referring to was found dying in space, apparently the survivor of an attack that destroyed her ship and killed her people. We're providing medical assistance. The alien's expression didn't change, but the patterns under its skin began to pulse more rapidly. You lie, human. The hair was secured in the sacred pod of our ancestors. She was being preserved until we could locate a suitable world for the restoration of our people. Your kind has interfered with the will of the gods themselves. Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. You're the ones who destroyed the other pods. You killed the other survivors. The impure bloodlines were cleansed, the alien replied without emotion. Only the heir carries the genetic template necessary for our species' rebirth. She will fulfill her sacred duty as countless generations before her have done. Behind the alien, Sarah could see other figures moving about what appeared to be a ship's bridge. The technology visible in the background was like nothing she had ever seen. Organic curves integrated seamlessly with crystalline structures, all of it pulsing with that same inner light she had observed in the child's pod. But it was the alien's words that chilled her to the bone. The child wasn't just a survivor. She was a living repository of her species' genetic future. And these weren't her rescuers coming to save her. They were her captors, planning to use her as nothing more than a breeding stock to rebuild their civilization. She's just a child, Sarah said, not bothering to hide her disgust. She is the continuation of our species, the alien replied. Her personal desires are irrelevant, as are yours, human. You have 30 seconds to lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Refuse, and we will disable your ship and take her by force. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Around them, the alien ships began to adjust their formation, surrounding the determination in a pattern that would make escape impossible. Orders, Commander? Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah looked around at her crew, at their faces, their posture, their hands poised over their control stations. These people had followed her into danger before. They trusted her judgment, her leadership. But this time she was asking them to choose between their own lives and the freedom of an alien child they had known for less than 2 days. Park, she said finally. Can you overload our reactor? The tech specialist's eyes went wide. Commander, if we destabilize the containment field, the explosion would... Take out everything within a few thousand kilometers. I know. Sarah's voice was steady, but inside her heart was racing. How long would it take? Maybe 10 minutes to set up the cascade failure. But, Commander, there's got to be another way. We could try to reach the nearest human patrol. No time. Sarah shook her head. And even if we did, what then? Start a war between humanity and a species that can apparently sterilize entire star systems? Send that child back to become a prisoner in her own body? She turned to look at each member of her crew in turn. I'm not ordering any of you to do this. Anyone who wants to surrender and take their chances with our alien friends can stay on the bridge. But I'm going down to the cargo bay, and I'm going to sit with that little girl while she dies free instead of living as a slave. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the intercom. Commander, you need to get down here right now. She's doing something. Sarah ran through the corridors, her crew close behind her. The ship shook almost continuously now, as the alien fleet adjusted their weapons to disable rather than destroy. They had perhaps minutes before the determination would be completely helpless. The cargo bay had changed. The air itself seemed to shimmer with an energy that made Sarah's skin tingle. The child's pod was glowing brighter than before, its crystalline surface pulsing in rapid, complex patterns. And the child herself, she was sitting up. The breathing apparatus had somehow reconfigured itself, allowing her to speak in the pod's alien atmosphere. Her large eyes were fixed on the display screens that showed the approaching alien fleet, and when she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She's speaking, Dr. Vasquez whispered in amazement. The translation computer can't process it directly, but there are patterns, mathematical progressions. I think she's trying to communicate. Sarah knelt beside the pod again, placing both hands on its warm surface. Those alien eyes turned to her, and once again she felt that gentle touch at the edges of her mind. This time, she didn't resist. Images flooded her consciousness. Not words, but pure meaning transferred directly from one mind to another. She saw the child's world before its destruction, a place of impossible beauty where crystalline cities rose from singing forests beneath alien stars. She felt the terror of the attack, the desperate flight in the refugee pods, the cold certainty that she was the last of her kind. But most powerfully, she felt the child's understanding of what awaited her if the pursuing fleet succeeded. Not death. That would have been a mercy. Instead, a lifetime of imprisonment, of forced breeding, of watching her own children raised as tools in the rebuilding of a civilization that would never again know freedom or joy. The mental contact broke, leaving Sarah gasping and shaking. The child was still watching her, but now there was something different in her expression. Hope, perhaps, or maybe gratitude. She's asking us not to give her back, Sarah whispered, though she wasn't sure how she knew that. She's asking us to choose for her, because she can't choose for herself. The ship shuddered again, more violently than before. Emergency alarms began sounding as critical systems started failing under the alien bombardment. Bridge to cargo bay, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. We've lost main engines and most of our defensive array. Boarding parties are preparing to dock, maybe 2 minutes. Sarah looked around at her team, then back down at the alien child. Those large, luminous eyes held an intelligence and awareness that spoke to something fundamental in human nature, the instinct to protect the innocent, to shield the vulnerable from those who would harm them. Park, she said quietly. Start the reactor overload. The tech specialist nodded grimly and began connecting his equipment to the ship's main power systems. Around the cargo bay, the rest of her crew took positions, their weapons trained on the doors. If the aliens wanted the child, they would have to fight for her. As Park worked, Sarah found herself thinking about her own daughter back on Earth. Emma, who would never know what had happened to her mother, or why she had chosen to die in the depths of space for the sake of an alien child. Emma, who would hopefully live in a universe where humanity had proven itself worthy of the stars. The child was watching them all now, her expression shifting between wonder and sorrow. She understood what they were doing, Sarah realized. She understood that these strange beings who looked nothing like her had chosen her life over their own. Cascade initiated, Park reported. 7 minutes to containment failure. On the displays around them, the alien ships moved into final boarding positions. Soon, there would be no choice left to make. The child lifted one graceful hand and pressed it against the inner surface of the pod directly opposite Sarah's palm. For a moment, through the crystalline barrier that separated them, human and alien touched across the vast gulf between species. And in that touch, Sarah understood that they had already won. The first sign that something had changed was the silence. Commander Sarah Chen had become accustomed to the constant background noise of their dying ship, the wheeze of overworked life support systems, the groan of stressed hull plating, the intermittent sparks from damaged electrical conduits. But now, as she knelt beside the alien child's crystalline pod, with her hand pressed against its warm surface, even those familiar sounds seemed to fade away. The second sign was the light. The geometric patterns carved into the pod surface weren't just glowing anymore. They were singing. Sarah couldn't hear it with her ears, but she felt it resonating in her bones, in her blood, in the deepest parts of her mind. The frequency seemed to match something fundamental in the universe itself, like the background radiation that permeated all of space. The third sign was the child herself. Her large, luminous eyes had closed again, but not in sleep or unconsciousness. Her breathing had deepened and steadied, and the monitors Dr. Vasquez had rigged showed biological patterns unlike anything they had observed before. Whatever was happening, it was profound, transformative, and then the alien fleet stopped firing. "Commander," Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom from the bridge, filled with confusion and growing alarm. "The pursuing ships have ceased their attack. They're maintaining position, but something's wrong. I'm detecting massive power fluctuations in their energy signatures." Sarah reluctantly pulled her hand away from the pod and activated her communicator. "Define wrong, Rodriguez." "It's like they're being drained, Commander. Whatever those ships use for power, something is pulling it away from them. And it's getting stronger." Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring the child's vital signs with increasing fascination and concern, suddenly looked up from her instruments with an expression of absolute wonder. "Commander, you need to see this. The power readings from the stasis pod, they're not coming from our generators anymore." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean the child is generating her own power now. Not just enough to maintain the stasis field, but exponentially more. And it's increasing every second." As if in response to their conversation, the light from the pod brightened noticeably. The crystalline patterns on its surface began to pulse in more complex rhythms, and the air itself seemed to thicken with potential energy. Tech Specialist Park looked up from where he had been preparing the reactor overload. "Commander, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout this region of space. Whatever's happening, it's affecting the fundamental structure of space-time." Before Sarah could respond, the child's eyes opened again. But now they weren't just luminous. They were incandescent, burning with an inner fire that seemed to contain the light of distant galaxies. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated not just through the air, but through the quantum foam itself. The translation computer, which had struggled futilely to process her earlier attempts at communication, suddenly came alive with rapid-fire analysis. Words, concepts, and meanings cascaded across its displays faster than any human eye could follow. "She's not just speaking. Dr.
Vasquez whispered in awe.
She's broadcasting directly into the quantum substrate, and the computer is finally beginning to understand." The child's gaze fixed on Sarah, and once again that gentle mental touch brushed against her consciousness. But this time it came with words, not heard, but understood. The voice in Sarah's mind was like starlight given sound. "You have given me the most precious gift possible, the choice to be free." Sarah felt tears beginning to form at the corners of her eyes. "What's happening to you?" "I am becoming what I was meant to be," the child replied, though her lips didn't move. Around the pod, the air began to shimmer with visible energy patterns, not what they wanted to make me, but what my people chose for me before they died. Images flashed through Sarah's mind, not chaotic and overwhelming like before, but clear and purposeful. She saw the child's world in its final days, as the alien fleet that now pursued them descended like a plague upon her people. But she also saw the desperate preparations, the last hope of a dying civilization. The child wasn't just a genetic repository for her species' rebirth. She was something far more profound, a living quantum computer, designed by her people's greatest scientists to contain not just their genetic patterns, but their entire collective consciousness, their history, their dreams, their very souls. She was meant to find a safe haven somewhere in the galaxy and begin the true restoration of her people, not as slaves or tools, but as free beings choosing their own destiny. But the process requires willing sacrifice, the child continued, her mental voice growing stronger as power continued to build around her pod. It requires beings who would risk everything for another's freedom. It requires humanity. On the displays throughout the cargo bay, new information began cascading across the screens. technical specifications, star charts, scientific principles that would advance human understanding by centuries. But most importantly, contact protocols for the dozen other species in this part of the galaxy, species who had been hiding, waiting, hoping for someone to finally stand up to the empire that had conquered or destroyed so many civilizations. "My God," Park breathed, staring at his instruments. "She's not just communicating with us. She's networked into our computer systems, but not invasively. She's asking permission for each connection, each data transfer." Sarah understood. Even with power enough to force her way into any system she chose, the child was still requesting consent, still respecting their autonomy. It was a lesson in ethics that put humanity's own moral development to shame. "The quantum resonance is building," the child explained as the very air around them began to glow with sympathetic energy. "When it reaches critical threshold, my people will be reborn, not in physical form, but as conscious entities capable of existing within any suitable technology. We will become partners with those who proved worthy, instead of masters seeking to rebuild an empire." "And if we hadn't proven worthy?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The child's expression grew infinitely sad. "Then I would have died as the last of my kind, and the universe would have been diminished by our passing. The choice was always yours to make." Another voice crackled over the intercom. Agent Liu from the bridge. "Commander, the alien fleet is attempting to withdraw, but they can't. Something is holding them in place. Their ships appear to be experiencing complete system failures." Sarah looked back down at the child, understanding dawning. "You're not just being reborn. You're ensuring they can never hurt anyone else again." "They chose to become predators," the child replied with a certainty that spoke of absolute justice. "They chose to destroy rather than create, to enslave rather than liberate. The quantum resonance will unmake their technology, strand them on the worlds they have conquered. They will have to learn to live with the consequences of their choices." The pond's surface was now so bright that Sarah had to shield her eyes. Throughout the ship, every screen, every display, every piece of electronic equipment began showing the same cascading stream of data. The child wasn't just communicating with them. She was integrating with their technology, becoming part of their ship's very structure, while remaining completely herself. "There's something else," she said, her mental voice growing urgent. "Something you must understand. This transformation requires an anchor, a willing consciousness to help bridge the gap between my people's quantum existence and physical reality. Someone must choose to link with us permanently." "What does that mean, Dr. Shao?" Vasquez asked, though she was addressing empty air. Only Sarah could hear the child's telepathic communication. Sarah translated and watched her team exchange worried glances. A permanent link with an alien consciousness? Even with all the good intentions in the universe, it could go horribly wrong. "It means becoming more than human," the child explained to Sarah directly. "Not losing who you are, but gaining access to knowledge, abilities, and perspectives that span multiple civilizations. It means becoming a bridge between species, a translator not just of languages, but of fundamental ways of thinking and being." Sarah understood the choice she was being offered. Link permanently with the child and her awakening people, becoming something new and strange and wonderful, but no longer entirely human, or refuse and watch as an entire civilization was reborn, without any connection to humanity except gratitude. It wasn't really a choice at all. "I'll do it," Sarah said quietly. "Are you certain?" the child asked, her mental voice full of gentle concern. "Once the link is established, it cannot be undone. You will still be yourself, but you will also be part of us, and we will be part of you." Sarah thought about her daughter Emma, waiting for her back on Earth. She thought about the crew who had followed her into this impossible situation. She thought about humanity itself, standing on the threshold of either greatness or destruction. "I'm certain," she replied. The child smiled then, the first truly happy expression Sarah had seen on her face. Around them, the quantum resonance reached its peak, and reality itself seemed to hold its breath. "Then welcome," the child said, "to the beginning of everything." The transformation began with light, not the harsh clinical illumination of the ship's emergency systems, but something warm and alive and infinitely welcoming. Sarah felt it flowing into her, through her, around her, rewriting the very quantum signature of her existence without diminishing who she was. Knowledge flooded her mind, not overwhelming, but organized, indexed, made available as naturally as her own memories. She could suddenly understand the navigation principles that had allowed the alien fleet to track them across interstellar distances. She could see the mathematical relationships that govern faster-than-light travel, the engineering principles behind matter-energy conversion, the biological processes that allowed consciousness to exist within quantum foam itself. But more than that, she could feel them. Dozens of consciousnesses awakening as the child's pod became a quantum nexus, a bridge between states of being. The last survivors of the Cathara civilization, preserved for centuries in quantum storage, finally finding a safe haven where they could exist as themselves again. They were grateful beyond words for humanity's intervention, but more than that, they were excited, eager to share, to learn, to grow alongside the species that had chosen compassion over self-interest. "Welcome to the collective, Sarah Chen," a chorus of voices whispered in her mind, each one distinct yet harmonizing with all the others. "Welcome to the first day of the galaxy's future." Around her, her crew watched in amazement as the cargo bay transformed. The child's pod dissolved into pure energy, its crystalline structure reforming into something that looked almost like a tree made of living light. Branches of quantum energy extended throughout the ship, integrating seamlessly with human technology while enhancing its capabilities beyond anything their engineers had dreamed possible. The child herself, though Sarah realized she would need to find a better name for her, stood in the center of it all, no longer confined to a pod or dependent on life support. She appeared solid, real, but Sarah could see the energy patterns that comprised her new form, the way she existed simultaneously in physical space and quantum dimensions. "Hello," the child said aloud for the first time, her voice carrying that same musical quality but now perfectly comprehensible. "My name is Lyrelai. Thank you for saving my people. Thank you for saving me. And thank you, Sarah Chen, for choosing to be our bridge to your species." Sarah tried to respond and discovered she could speak both with her voice and directly into the quantum substrate. The sensation was indescribable, like suddenly gaining a new sense she had never known she was missing. "It's going to be quite an adjustment for all of us," she managed, looking around at her crew's amazed faces. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with wonder. "Commander, you need to see this. The alien fleet, their ships are just floating, dead in space. And our sensors are picking up something else. Ships approaching from multiple vectors, but these ones are broadcasting friendship protocols and languages our computers somehow understand now." Sarah smiled, feeling the vast network of consciousness that now existed within her ship's quantum-enhanced systems. Ilarly's people weren't the only ones who had been waiting for someone to prove that freedom and compassion could triumph over tyranny and exploitation. "Put me through to the approaching fleets," Sarah ordered. "Commander, there are dozens of them." "Maybe hundreds. The communication channels are going to be. Trust me," Sarah interrupted, feeling the new capabilities flowing through her enhanced awareness. "I can handle it." As the communications opened and voices from across the galaxy began speaking in harmony, Sarah realized that their desperate rescue mission had become something far greater than anyone could have imagined. They hadn't just saved one alien child. They had triggered the awakening of an entire galactic confederation that had been waiting for proof that there were species willing to fight for what was right rather than what was profitable. Humanity had passed its first cosmic test. Now the real work could begin. 3 months after the transformation of the Determination, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station Haven's Light, watching as another refugee convoy emerged from hyperspace near Earth's outer perimeter. The ships were a mixture of designs she was still learning to recognize. The organic curves of Meridani vessels, the crystalline geometry of Altarian craft, the flowing metal sculptures that served as transportation for the Zenthis collective, all of them seeking sanctuary, all of them fleeing the same empire that had once pursued a dying child through the depths of space. Sarah's enhanced awareness let her simultaneously monitor the station's operations, communicate with the approaching ships in their native languages, and coordinate with the defense fleet that now patrolled this region of space. The integration with Lyralai's people had changed her in ways she was still discovering, but the most profound change was perspective. She no longer saw the universe as an empty void punctuated by islands of life. Instead, she perceived it as a vast web of consciousness, connection, and possibility. "The hegemony fleet has withdrawn from the Kepler Nebula," Agent Rodriguez reported from the tactical center. He had remained fully human by his own choice, but like the rest of her original crew, he had volunteered for enhanced cybernetic implants that allowed him to interface with the station's quantum-enhanced systems. "That makes the 7th system they've abandoned this month." Sarah nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and concern through her link with the Cathara collective. The transformation of the Determination had done more than awaken Lee Riley's people. It had created a quantum beacon that resonated across interstellar distances, announcing to every oppressed species in the galaxy that someone was finally willing to fight back. The results had been overwhelming. Within weeks, ships began arriving from dozens of different worlds, not just refugees but entire fleets of species that had been hiding, preparing, waiting for someone to take the first stand against the hegemony. The organic ships belonged to the Meridani, a plant-based collective intelligence that had been conducting guerrilla warfare against hegemony forces for over a century. The crystalline vessels carried representatives of the Altarian consonants, masters of quantum engineering who had been sabotaging hegemony supply lines from within their conquered territories. The flowing metal craft housed the Zenthis, former slaves who had liberated themselves and spent decades freeing others. They had all been fighting the same war, Sarah realized. Humanity had simply provided the catalyst that allowed them to fight it together. Dr. Vasquez, report on Project Renaissance, Sarah requested through the quantum link. Elena Vasquez's response came instantly, transmitted directly to Sarah's consciousness from the research laboratories deep within the station. Over the past 3 months, Elena had become the primary liaison between human science and Cathara technology, her mind enhanced but not fundamentally altered like Sarah's. We've successfully integrated Cathara quantum biological systems with 17 different alien technologies, Elena reported with barely contained excitement. The medical applications alone will revolutionize healthcare for every species in the Alliance. We're talking about cellular regeneration, consciousness transfer, even the ability to survive in environments that would normally be lethal. But it was the military applications that kept Sarah awake during her rest periods. The Alliance fleet now possessed weapons and defenses that could match anything the hegemony deployed. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space-time. Shields that drew power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Weapons that could disrupt the molecular bonds holding enemy vessels together. The question was whether they would need to use them. Incoming priority transmission, Technical Specialist Park announced from the communications center. It's from the Terran Defense Force. Admiral Morrison wants a direct conference. Sarah sighed internally. The politics of first contact had proven almost as challenging as the technology. Earth's government was still struggling to understand what had happened when a routine ISI mission returned with an entire alien civilization and the beginnings of a galactic confederation. Some officials were thrilled at the technological advances and new alliances. Others were terrified of the implications. Admiral Morrison, unfortunately, fell into the latter category. Put him through to conference room 7, Sarah instructed, and ask Lyreley to join us. The conference room was a marvel of integrated technology, its walls displaying real-time data from across the solar system, while quantum processing cores hummed quietly beneath the floor. Admiral Morrison's image materialized in the center of the room, his expression as stern and disapproving as always. "Commander Chen," he began without preamble, "I've been reviewing your latest reports, and I have to say I'm deeply concerned about the direction this alliance is taking." Sarah settled into her chair as Lyreley manifested beside her. The Cathara child, though she was no longer really a child, had learned to take physical form when interacting with humans, but her true existence spanned multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Specify your concerns, Admiral," Sarah replied diplomatically. Morrison's face reddened slightly. "My concerns?" "Commander, in 3 months you've turned Earth into the center of what amounts to an interstellar military alliance without any oversight from legitimate governmental authority. You've shared advanced alien technology with species we know nothing about. And now you're telling me that hegemony forces are massing for a major offensive against this station? The hegemony has been committing genocide across the galaxy for centuries," Lyreley interjected, her voice carrying harmonics that somehow made her words seem perfectly reasonable. "They view any form of free association between species as a threat to their empire. The alliance exists to protect those who choose freedom over subjugation." Morrison waved dismissively. "That's all very philosophical, but my responsibility is to the people of Earth. What happens when this hegemony decides that humanity is too dangerous to be left alone? What happens when they show up in our system with enough firepower to turn our planet into cosmic debris?" Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with Lyreley. It was a valid concern, one they had been preparing for since the Alliance's formation. "Admiral," Sarah said carefully, "the hegemony already knows about humanity. They've known since the moment we rescued Lyreley. The only question is whether we face them as isolated primitive prey or as part of a confederation capable of defending itself. Besides which," Lyreley added, "Earth is no longer defensible by conventional means. The quantum resonance effects from my people's awakening have created gravitational anomalies throughout this system." Any major hegemony fleet would be detected days before it could reach your world. That wasn't entirely reassuring to Sarah, who knew that the same quantum effects that provided early warning also made Earth a beacon visible across half the galaxy. They were committed now, whether Admiral Morrison liked it or not. There's something else, Sarah continued. Intelligence gathered by our Meridani allies suggests that the hegemony is planning something beyond a simple military offensive. They're calling it the final cleansing, a systematic elimination of every species that has shown resistance to their rule. Morrison's expression grew grave. How certain are you of this intelligence? Certain enough that we're accelerating Project Renaissance, Sarah replied. We need to be ready for the possibility that this becomes a war not just for freedom but for survival. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays that surrounded him. Sarah could see him weighing the political implications against the strategic realities. What do you need from Earth? He asked finally. Volunteers, Sarah said immediately. People willing to undergo the enhancement process and serve as bridges between humanity and the other alliance species. We need scientists, engineers, military personnel, diplomats. The alliance is growing faster than we can keep up with. And the risks? The enhancement process is irreversible, Lyra Ali answered honestly. Those who undergo it will remain human, but they will also become something more. They will be able to communicate directly with any alliance species, interface with quantum-enhanced technologies, and exist partially outside normal space-time. Some consider it evolution. Others see it as a loss of humanity. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll present your request to the Global Security Council. But, Commander, I want your personal assessment. Are we doing the right thing here? Sarah stood and walked to the room's main viewport, looking out at the impossible vista of ships from dozens of worlds sharing the same space, working together despite differences that should have made cooperation impossible. In the distance she could see construction crews, human, Cathara, Meridani, and Altarian, working side by side to complete the Alliance's newest vessels. Admiral, she said finally, 3 months ago a dying alien child asked us to choose her freedom over our safety. That choice led to this. She gestured toward the viewport. Every species out there made the same choice we did. They chose to fight for something greater than themselves. Maybe that's what humanity's real contribution to the galaxy is. Not our technology or our weapons, but our willingness to stand up for what's right even when it's dangerous. Very poetic, Morrison replied dryly. But the Global Security Council is going to want more concrete assurances. Then tell them this, Sarah said, turning back to face his image. The hegemony has ruled through fear for thousands of years. They have convinced entire civilizations that resistance is futile, that the only choice is submission or annihilation. But fear only works when you're alone. Together, we're proving that another way is possible. As if summoned by her words, the station's proximity alarms began sounding softly. Sarah's enhanced awareness immediately identified the source. New arrivals, but not hostile ones. Admiral, you might want to see this, Agent Park announced from the communications center. We're receiving contact protocols from, well, everyone. It looks like word about the Alliance has reached the Outer Rim territories. The main display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Dozens of new contacts were approaching from every direction. Not ships this time, but entire fleets. Sarah's quantum-enhanced perception allowed her to identify them instantly. The Cassinian Republic, fleeing the destruction of their homeworld. The Zephyrian Collective, abandoning their hidden fortress worlds. The Free Traders Alliance, emerging from the deep void where they had been conducting covert operations against hegemony commerce. My God, Morrison whispered, staring at the display. How many of them are there? Every species that values freedom over security. Lyra Lai replied softly. Every civilization that believes individuals should have the right to choose their own destiny. They've all been waiting for someone to prove that resistance was possible. Sarah felt a familiar sensation through her link with the Cathara Collective. The approaching ships weren't just seeking alliance. They were bringing intelligence, resources, and warnings. The final cleansing wasn't a theoretical threat anymore. It was imminent. Admiral Morrison, Sarah said urgently, we're going to need those volunteers sooner than expected. And you're going to need to convince Earth's governments that neutrality is no longer an option. The hegemony has designated humanity as a primary threat to galactic stability. Based on what? Based on what we've accomplished here, Sarah replied, feeling the weight of consequence settling on her shoulders. We've done the one thing the hegemony thought impossible. We've united dozens of species in common cause. To them, that makes us more dangerous than any superweapon. Morrison's image flickered as his transmission began to break up. Whether due to technical difficulties or quantum interference, Sarah couldn't tell. "I'll contact you within 6 hours," he said. "Commander, I hope you're right about this alliance of yours, because if you're wrong, you may have just signed humanity's death warrant." The transmission cut off, leaving Sarah alone with Lyra Lay in the quantum-enhanced conference room. Through the viewport, more ships continued to arrive, their crews eager to join the growing confederation that had started with one simple choice. "Do you think he's right?" Sarah asked. "Have we doomed humanity by getting involved?" Lyra Lai's form shimmered slightly as she processed data from across the Alliance network. "The hegemony would have come for humanity eventually," she replied. "Your species shows too much potential, too much willingness to explore and grow. Empires built on stagnation cannot tolerate evolution." Sarah nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a crossroads where every choice led to uncharted territory. "How long do we have?" "According to intelligence gathered by our allies, the hegemony is assembling the largest fleet in their history. Projections suggest they will arrive within 37 days. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through the quantum link, feeling the vast network of consciousness that now spanned multiple star systems. Thousands of minds working together, preparing for a confrontation that would determine whether freedom or tyranny ruled the galaxy. "Then we'd better make sure we're ready," she said. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, signaling the beginning of final preparations, Sarah realized that their rescue of one alien child had become something neither she nor the hegemony had anticipated. It had become a revolution. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the quantum command chamber at the heart of Haven's Light, her consciousness simultaneously present in the physical space and distributed across 17 different dimensional layers. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of over 3,000 Alliance vessels, while beneath her feet, the Kythara quantum cores hummed with power that seemed to bend space-time itself. The hegemony had arrived. Their fleet eclipsed anything in recorded galactic history. Massive dreadnoughts the size of small moons, accompanied by carrier vessels that disgorged swarms of smaller attack craft like metallic locusts. Conservative estimates put their numbers at over 50,000 ships, representing the combined military might of an empire that had ruled unopposed for millennia. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Sarah felt an unexpected calm settling over her enhanced consciousness. "Alliance fleet reports, ready status across all vectors," Agent Rodriguez announced from the Tactical Coordination Center. Over the past month, he had undergone his own enhancement process, though he had chosen a more limited integration that preserved his essential humanity while giving him access to the Alliance's communication networks. Meridani bioships are synchronized with quantum resonance fields. Dr. Vasquez reported from the research station. Altairian phase ships are standing by in dimensional overlap positions. Synthesis collective units are prepared for molecular disruption attacks. Sarah nodded, feeling the vast network of allied consciousness that now surrounded Earth's solar system. They were outnumbered approximately 16-1, but numbers alone didn't tell the whole story. The Alliance fleet represented something the hegemony had never faced before, a truly cooperative military force where each species' unique abilities were integrated into a coherent whole rather than simply thrown at the enemy in desperate waves. "Incoming transmission from the hegemony flagship," Technical Specialist Park reported. "They're requesting immediate surrender and transfer of what they're calling the quantum aberration." Sarah exchanged a look with Lyra Lai, who had manifested her physical form beside the command console. Over the past month, the Kythara child had grown into something remarkable. No longer the frightened refugee they had rescued, but a bridge between dimensions, a living nexus that connected not just her own people, but every consciousness in the Alliance network. "Put them through," Sarah ordered. The main holographic display shifted to show the bridge of the hegemony flagship. The being that appeared was unlike the relatively familiar aliens who had pursued them months ago. This creature was massive, its body a fusion of organic tissue and metallic implants that suggested centuries of technological augmentation. When it spoke, its voice carried undertones that registered as barely contained violence. "I am Supreme Hierarch Vextane of the Hegemony 4th Battle Fleet," it announced. "You will immediately surrender the quantum aberration known as Lyra Lai, along with all humans who have been contaminated by exposure to forbidden technologies. Compliance will result in swift termination. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of the star system." Sarah stepped forward, acutely aware that her words were being transmitted not just to the hegemony fleet, but to every allied vessel in the system. More than that, through the quantum network, her response would reach resistance cells hidden throughout hegemony space, offering either hope or despair depending on what happened in the next few hours. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Interstellar Security Initiative and the Galactic Freedom Alliance, she replied formally. The individual you refer to as an aberration is a free citizen under our protection, as are all the beings in this system who have chosen to stand together against tyranny. Vexthane's expression didn't change, but the patterns of metal embedded in its flesh began to pulse with ominous light. You speak of freedom as if it were a virtue rather than a disease. Your species has existed for mere millennia, yet you dare to challenge an order that has maintained galactic stability for eons. Stability built on genocide and enslavement is an order, Lyrelai interjected, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the quantum substrate itself. It's the death of everything that makes existence worthwhile. The hegemony commander's attention fixed on her, and Sarah felt something like hunger radiating from the creature. The Kithara quantum matrix, it said with obvious satisfaction. Do you truly believe your primitive allies can protect you, child? We have harvested the consciousness of 1,000 species. Your people's knowledge will become part of our collective, whether you cooperate or not. The difference, Lyrelai replied calmly, is that we chose to share our knowledge freely. You steal it through conquest and murder. That difference matters more than you understand. Vexthane made a dismissive gesture, and the transmission cut off. Throughout the system, the hegemony fleet began to move, their formation shifting into attack patterns that had obliterated countless worlds over the centuries. All stations, this is Commander Chen, Sarah announced through the Alliance network. Execute Liberation Protocol. Show them what happens when free people choose to fight together. The battle began not with explosions or energy beams, but with something the hegemony had never encountered: perfect coordination across multiple dimensions of space-time. The Altarian phase ships vanished from normal space, reappearing inside the hegemony formation where they began systematically disrupting the enemy vessel's quantum foundations. Miradani bioships released clouds of engineered organisms that interfaced directly with hegemony computer systems, turning their own technology against them. Synthesis collective units phased through enemy hulls, their molecular manipulation abilities allowing them to literally dissolve critical ship components. And binding it all together was the Kithara quantum network, allowing instant communication and coordination across impossible distances. Enemy fleet is attempting to establish counter-resonance fields, Dr. Vasquez reported as hegemony ships began adapting to the Alliance's exotic attacks. They're learning fast. Sarah wasn't surprised. An empire that had survived for millennia didn't do so by being inflexible. Already she could see hegemony vessels reconfiguring their defenses, their computers analyzing and countering Alliance tactics with machine efficiency. Phase 2, Sarah ordered. Show them what they've never seen before. This was where humanity's contribution to the Alliance became clear. While other species had developed incredible technologies or abilities, humans had contributed something else entirely: the willingness to sacrifice everything for an ideal. Across the Alliance fleet, human-enhanced commanders began implementing tactics that no rational computer would recommend. Ships deliberately exposed themselves to enemy fire to create openings for allies. Crews volunteered for suicide missions that would cripple key enemy vessels. Entire squadrons used themselves as living shields to protect more valuable Alliance assets. It should have been a disaster. Instead, it became inspiration. Seeing humans willingly sacrifice themselves for the freedom of species they had met only months before, the other Alliance members found themselves pushed beyond their normal limitations. Miradani bioships began overloading their own life support systems to generate more powerful weapons. Altarian vessels stayed phased beyond safe parameters to maintain tactical advantages. Synthesis collective units pushed their molecular manipulation abilities to dangerous extremes. The hegemony fleet, accustomed to facing enemies who fought primarily for survival, had no tactical response to opponents who fought for something greater than themselves. Enemy flagship is breaking formation, Rodriguez reported with barely controlled excitement. Multiple hegemony vessels are showing signs of system failures. Their coordination matrix is destabilizing. Sarah felt a surge of hope through the quantum network, but she also sensed something else: desperation. The hegemony wasn't just losing the battle. They were watching the fundamental assumptions that supported their empire crumble before their eyes. Commander, Lyrelai warned, her form flickering between dimensions, Vexthane is preparing to activate something. I can sense massive energy buildups across multiple quantum layers. Sarah's enhanced awareness suddenly flooded with warning signals from throughout the system. The hegemony flagship was drawing power not just from its own reactors, but from the quantum vacuum itself. Whatever they were preparing, it would have enough energy to sterilize entire star systems. A quantum cascade weapon, Dr. Vasquez breathed, her face pale as she studied the readings. They're going to collapse local space-time rather than accept defeat. The implications were staggering. Such a weapon wouldn't just destroy the Alliance fleet, it would unravel the fundamental structure of reality throughout the solar system, erasing Earth and everything in it from existence. Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. They could retreat, save most of the Alliance fleet, and continue the fight elsewhere. But Earth would be lost, along with billions of humans who had never asked to be part of this galactic war. Or they could try something that had never been attempted before. Lyrelai, Sarah said quietly. Can your people access the quantum foundations of the weapon itself? The Kithara child's eyes widened with understanding and horror. Yes, but it would require linking every consciousness in the Alliance network directly into the quantum substrate. The mental strain alone could destroy half our people. And if we don't try? Lyrelai was quiet for a moment, her attention focused on probabilities cascading across multiple dimensions. The Cascade weapon will destroy everything within 50 light-years. But Sarah, what you're suggesting isn't just dangerous. It's evolution. If we succeed, the Alliance won't be a collection of separate species anymore. We'll become something entirely new. Sarah looked around at her crew, at the displays showing thousands of ships fighting desperately against impossible odds, at the image of Earth hanging vulnerable in the distance. All Alliance vessels, this is Commander Chen, she announced through the quantum network. We're going to try something unprecedented. Every enhanced individual, every consciousness connected to the network needs to link directly into the quantum substrate. We're going to turn their weapon against the fundamental structure of their empire. Across thousands of ships, beings who had never met in person reached across the void to join their minds and souls in common purpose. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding exponentially as the Alliance network became something more than the sum of its parts. Through